in the point of examination as well as your being a doctor. And so one of you can answer me this question: largest chemical factory of the world. Which is the largest chemical factory? It is this BASF, the chemical company, Baden Aniline and Soda Factory, Germany. So there's nothing much to do with it, because we are going to discuss about today's topic will be about very important topic, that is disorders of acid-base balance. So everyone is aware about what is the normal pH, normal PCO2, O2, and normal serum sodium concentration, potassium concentration, normal anion gap. So you are all aware of it, how the blood pH is maintained by various buffers in the body, and what is the respiratory mechanism of regulation of pH, and what is the renal mechanism of regulation of pH, and with the diagrams you are well aware about it. In this part is you may be asked some questions related to the acid-base balance disorders. So it can be in the form of a case history, or it could be like a laboratory analysis of ABG will be given, and we will ask you to write, interpret the results. Just you have to say that pH is raised or normal, or it is decreased, what has happened to bicarbonate and what has happened to the carbon dioxide levels. So these are the things which will be asked in your examination. And as a medical practitioner as well, you need to know some things related to this disorder, because whenever you are posted in casualty, whenever you are posted in emergency medicine department, and when you are posted in ICU setup, you will be subjected to such kind of cases wherein your a thorough evaluation of arterial blood gas plays an important vital role in the diagnosis of several metabolic and respiratory disorder. So with this view, I hope that every student must learn about it, and you should be able to diagnose what is exactly the disturbance of the acid-base balance the patient is having. So you should be able, unless you diagnose it properly, your treatment will be in the wrong direction. That's the reason this plays a very significant role, and one should be aware of it, and how this ABG analysis is done. How do we collect the blood sample for arterial blood gas analysis? Can anyone tell me which is the artery commonly used for arterial blood gas analysis? You can WhatsApp me. Which artery do you go to prefer? Some of my friends used to tell me when they were doing their MRCP in London, they will not ask the intern or the doctor to directly, whenever they are posted in the internal medicine department, especially as a part of housemanship. So they were asked to demonstrate ABG analysis by puncturing the radial artery on each other. They are not going to allow you directly to perform it on the patient. First you have to perform it on each other. When two interns are they posted in the same, suppose someone wants to do arterial blood gas analysis for the first time, first they have to experiment on each other, then they are going to allow you to do it on the patient. It is like that. But in our country we are very fortunate that we have many cases, and patients are not going to question you much, and high skill is required when you do this kind of skilled works. So this is what exactly happens when you practice outside India. So but in our country still the things are much better with respect to the clinical skills and clinical practice as well. So with this introduction, let's recollect about Henderson-Hasselbalch equation. It shows the relationship between the pH, pKa, concentration of acid and conjugate base. Thus pH is equal to pKa plus logarithm of base or salt divided by acid. Suppose when the acid is base, concentration is same. Suppose acid is 1, alkali is 1 and salt is also 1, the pH would be is equal to the pKa value. So that's about the Henderson-Hasselbalch equation. And how do we apply this equation in the clinical practice? So the pH changes that's going to occur when you're going to add a small amount of acid or alkali to the buffer solution could be calculated. And one more thing, from the pH, the ratio of salt and acid could be calculated. So this is an important application of the Henderson-Hasselbalch equation. Now coming to little bit about the anion gap. So normally the anion gap, it is contributed by the unmeasured, right? They are called as unmeasured anions which going to contribute to the anion gap. So Commonly measured ions like sodium, potassium, together they're going to account for 95%, and the chloride and bicarbonate is going to account for 86%. Unmeasured ions are going to contribute to the anion gap. Which are those? Number 1 phosphate, number 2 sulfate, number 3 protein, number 4 organic acid. So please do remember, all of you do remember and recollect it. The anion gap is due to presence of unmeasured anions like number 1 phosphate, number 2 sulfates, number 3 protein, number 4 organic acid. Please do remember this very important thing. What is urinary anion gap? Normal, and here the normal serum anion gap would be 10 to 12 millimole per liter. Okay, just getting my point? It is 10 to 12 millimole per liter. Yeah, I got an answer. It's a radial artery which is used for the arterial blood gas analysis. Can anyone tell me how? Okay, we are going to discuss it in the next slide. Let me finish this urine anion gap first. And the urine anion gap, it is normally it is minus 20 to minus 50 millimole per liter. How is this urine anion gap is going to help us? It's going to help us to estimate ammonia excretion, and it is calculated using the formula urine sodium plus urinary potassium minus urinary chloride is equal to 80 minus urinary ammonium ion excretion. In acidosis, what is going to happen? Ammonium excretion increases, so UVG also increases. But in renal tubular acidosis, due to defective ammonium ion excretion, UVG is going to be positive, which is equal to 0.5 into urinary osmolar gap. If you are unable to follow this exactly, at least try to remember the formula, which is urinary sodium plus urinary potassium minus urinary chloride, which is going to be equal to 80 minus urinary ammonium. If you are unable to remember this also, at least try to remember the normal range, which is minus 20 to minus 50. See what is happening in acidosis. Basically, acidosis is pH of the serum or the blood is going to be down, right? So pH is equal to negative logarithm of hydrogen ions. If the pH is less, the hydrogen ions are going to be more. Now, how does our body compensate? We want to bring the pH to the normal level. So it will promote more and more excretion of hydrogen ion. So what will happen? The hydrogen ion going to get excreted in the form of ammonia. So in acidosis, basically as a part of compensatory mechanism, the ammonium ions are going to excrete. It's going to be increased. That's what happens whenever there is a urine ammonia increases, the urine anion gap is going to be positive. It's going to be raised. That's what is we are going to explain you in this slide. Trying to explain you. But in RTA, what happens due to defective ammonium ion secretion? Even though renal tubular acidosis is a metabolic acidosis, but there is a defective ammonium because there is a problem in the renal tubules, right? So because of the defective ammonium secretion, the UVG is going to be positive. Remember that in both the cases UVG is positive. In metabolic acidosis, due to RTA, but still the UVG is going to be positive because of the defective ammonium ion secretion. Getting my point? So thus UVG is going to be positive. Don't worry about urinary ammonium excretion, all that. But if you are able to remember, you remember the 0.5 multiplied by urinary osmolality minus 2 into urinary sodium plus potassium plus urinary urea plus urinary glucose. So don't bother about this equation. So but rest of the points try to remember. Now this what is called osmolar gap. It is nothing but the difference between the measured and calculated plasma osmolality. It is nothing but the difference between calculated and measured osmolality, which is going to be given by the formula 2 multiplied by serum sodium concentration plus glucose concentration divided by 18 plus urea divided by 2.8. This is the formula to remember the osmolality. 2 multiplied by sodium concentration plus glucose concentration divided by 18 plus urea divided by 2.8. Normal osmolar gap is going to be around 10 milliosmoles. Okay, it is 10 milliosmoles. When it is going to be greater than 25, we call it as high gap, implies the presence of unmeasured osmoles like alcohol, methanol, ethylene glycol, all that. Okay. Now, our topic today, we are going to deal with acid. Before I start with acid-base balance, we will require something called ABG analysis. Yeah, this is the ABG mission. You can see here. This is the ABG mission. ABG stands for arterial blood gas analysis, and the type of sample we are going to use will be whole blood, which is pricked from the radial artery itself. And can you tell me which syringe are you going to use for collecting the arterial blood gas? Are you going to use a normal syringe, or are you going to add some anticoagulant or something like that? In which syringe? It should be preloaded with that particular anticoagulant before you draw the sample. Can anyone tell me? Say anticoagulant, we are going to use it, and why? What's the reason? Yes? I got one answer. Heparin. It is heparin. Very good. It is a heparinized syringe that we are going to use for the arterial blood gas analysis, because we want the blood to be in the liquid state itself for the analysis to carry out. So what does this machine give the information about? It's going to tell you what is a pH, it's going to tell you what is the bicarbonate concentration in the arteries and in the arterial blood, and what is the PCO2 concentration, what is the PO2 concentration, what is the blood lactate concentration. Anyway, the blood lactate, bicarbonate and other parameters are of not, they are important in the clinical practice. For your UG level, you can at least remember that pH, PCO2, PO2 and bicarbonate. This is the information that you want to require for the diagnosis of a particular acid-base balance disorder. Okay. Now, can anyone tell me what are the indications of this arterial blood gas analysis? Suppose you are posted in the emergency department. Now, the patient comes with so many, some patient is coming to the tertiary medical care, that is a medical college, means it will be most of the time referred case. Maybe they would have tried to manage at primary health center level, or they may, would have tried to manage at some other secondary hospitals, but things doesn't work out, and finally they come to the tertiary medical center, where all other facilities will be available, right? So if such kind of patients will come, most of the time they will be referred patients. Now tell me, what are the indications for carrying out arterial blood gas analysis? As a biochemistry student, indications you must know. Okay, tell me. You can make a guesswork, or you can simply analyze the disorders and you can still say the answers. Yes, I want the answers. What are the indications? सभी पेशेंट में करेंगे arterial blood gas analysis, then they will never going to come to your clinic or your hospital again. What are the indications? No one? No one knows the answer? What are the indications for arterial blood gas analysis? So which are the four failures? Four failures that's going to be an indication for arterial blood gas analysis. One is multi-organ failure, renal failure, number 2 renal failure, number 3 respiratory failure. I already said you the respiratory compensation, renal compensation of your maintaining pH. Then why you are not able to, you should be able to answer this kind of questions. You are simply keeping quiet. So one is any organ failure, number 2 multi-organ failure, any one organ failure, it can be any organ. Number 2 multi-organ failure, at a time patient is having kidney failure as well as respiratory failure. Number 3 renal failure, number 4 respiratory failure, or number 4 you can put it as cardiac failure, cardiac, respiratory, renal failure, and number 4 multi-organ failure. Apart from this, the patient with uncontrolled diabetes mellitus and patient with a history of poisoning like salicylate poisoning. So these are the important indications for. Can anyone tell me, in the present day we are all facing with the COVID-19, so what could be the failure in this kind of patient? Which system has got a more tendency to undergo failure? the patient will be put on ventilator. So it is a respiratory failure. Okay, so these are the indications of arterial blood gas analysis: multi-organ failure, respiratory, renal, cardiac failure. Getting my point? And uncontrolled diabetes mellitus, and poisoning like salicylate poisoning, methanol poisoning. Okay, so these are the important indications. Now coming to the disturbances of acid base balance. What is a normal pH? 7.38 to 7.42. Normal hydrogen ion concentration is about 40 nanomole per liter, and we call it as acidosis when the pH is less than 7.3. As per the books, you can take it as 7.38, and life threatening acidosis happens when the pH is going to be falling with less than 7.25, and death is confirmed when the pH is going to be less than 7. So acidosis, basically the damage that happens to the body why the patient loses his life when the pH is going to be less than 7. The basic reason is because of the CNS depression and the coma. And pH with greater than 7.42, we call it as alkalosis, and it's going to be dangerous when it is going to be greater than 7.5. Death occurs when pH is going to cross 7.6. So what does alkalosis cause? It causes neuromuscular hyperexcitability, and it causes like calcium deficient tetany. You would have seen, right? So the tetany like condition happens when a patient is suffering from severe alkalosis. Now, so all of you please give an attention about this particular table, which is going to tell you whether the patient is suffering from MA, RA. So whenever we call it as acidosis, pH is going to be less than 7.38, right? And based on pH, we can diagnose whether the condition is acidosis or alkalosis. Point number 1. Point number 2. Depending upon the bicarbonate levels, we can diagnose whether it is a metabolic or respiratory. Number 3. Depending upon the PCO2, we are going to say whether it is a respiratory acidosis or respiratory alkalosis. So these are the 3 important points to diagnose any given basic disturbance in the acid-base balance. Suppose looking at the bicarbonate level, one will come to the conclusion that the bicarbonates are something to do with the metabolic component. Suppose the bicarbonate concentration has gone down, it's going to be metabolic acidosis. It's going to be shooted up, it's going to be alkalosis. That's all. There is nothing to worry about this. Now, coming to the PCO2. It could be normal, or it could be in case of compensatory, or it could be decreased. Getting my point? PCO2 can be decreased. All the 3 are in the same direction in case of MA. That is metabolic acidosis. pH is reduced, bicarbonate is reduced, PCO2 is also decreased, but it could be normal also. Depends upon the particular patient or the condition. What's going to happen in case of metabolic alcohol? The primary defect is, right? Primary defect is at the increase in the bicarbonate level, and the pH is going to be raised because it is alkalosis. And what's going to happen to the PCO2? It's going to be raised or it's going to be normal. What happens to respiratory acidosis? Acidosis, we call it as decrease in the pH, and there is a primary deficit with the PCO2. There is an increase in the PCO2 in case of respiratory acidosis, and the bicarbonate is going to be raised or going to be normal. And respiratory alkalosis, once we say the pH is going to be raised and PCO2 is going to be decreased, and respiratory alkalosis, the patient will have decreased bicarbonate levels or normal. So please try to focus on this table, very important, and it's very important to remember, because unless you are thorough about this table, you cannot make any diagnosis. So let us discuss again. Metabolic acidosis, once we say acidosis, pH is going to be reduced. What happens to bicarbonate? Is going to be decreased, and the PCO2 is going to be decreased or going to be normal. All are in the same direction in case of metabolic acidosis. What's going to happen with respect to metabolic alkalosis? Still it is not audible and visible. Am I audible now? Not audible, not visible लिख रहे स्टूडेंट्स. यहाँ तो लाइट है. अच्छा, तो वेट करना है. ठीक. So there is be thorough about this table. The pH is going to be reduced in metabolic acidosis and bicarbonate is going to be reduced, and PCO2 is going to be normal or reduced. In metabolic alkalosis, there will be shoot up in the pH and increase in the bicarbonate, and the PCO2 is going to be raised or going to be normal. And respiratory acidosis, pH is going to be reduced and bicarbonate is going to be raised or normal, or PCO2 is going to be increased. In respiratory alkalosis, the pH is going to be raised and bicarbonate is going to be decreased or normal, and PCO2 is going to be decreased. Now, coming to the expected compensation in the disorders. Like, suppose the patient has got a disorder called metabolic acidosis. How does the PCO2 change as a part of see, all of you try to remember one important aspect. Whenever there is a metabolic acid-base balance disorder, there will be respiratory compensation. Respiratory compensation happens by maintaining the PCO2 levels, either by increasing PCO2 or by reducing the PCO2 levels. Understand? So that's about the compensation. Now in case of metabolic acidosis, how does the compensation happen? It's going to happen that PCO2, how are you going to calculate the PCO2? Whenever there is a decrease in the bicarbonate level, the body compensates by causing decrease in the PCO2 level. How the PCO2 level is going to decrease? It is calculated using the formula 1.5 multiplied by bicarbonate level plus 8. In case of metabolic alkalosis, the PCO2 is going to increase to compensate the alkalosis. So PCO2 changes 0.6 millimeters of mercury per millimole per liter change in the bicarbonate levels. And respiratory acidosis in acute and chronic, there will be increase in the 1 millimole of हेलो, अरे पावर कट हुआ है नीचे, ऊपर तो पावर है, स्टूडेंट्स वेट कर रहे हैं क्लास के लिए. चालू हो गया था क्लास. अरे यूट्यूब नहीं चल रहा है, स्टूडेंट्स नहीं देख पा रहे, ना विजिबल है ना ऑडिबल है मेरा क्लास. नहीं पता फर्स्ट फ्लोर का, मैं सेकेंड फ्लोर में क्लास ले रही थी. ठीक है, वो बोला. हाँ ठीक है. let's back. So in metabolic acidosis, the pH is going to be reduced, bicarbonate is going to be reduced, and PCO2 is going to be reduced. They are all in the same direction. In metabolic alkalosis, there is a raise in pH and raise in the bicarbonate, and PCO2 is going to be raised. Is going to be normal. What happens in respiratory acidosis? pH is going to be reduced, and bicarbonate is going to be raised or normal, but the PCO2 is going to be raised, and the exactly opposite happens in alkalosis respiratory. PCO2 is going to fall and pH is going to raise, and bicarbonate is going to be normal or reduced. Look at this compensation in these disorders. In metabolic acidosis, always remember one thing, that whenever there is a metabolic acid-base balance disorder, the compensation happens by the respiratory component, by kicking out the carbon dioxide or by retaining the carbon dioxide, by the mechanism called ventilation, hyperventilation or hypoventilation. What happens in acidosis is that whenever there is a fall in the bicarbonate level, the body compensates by causing decrease in the PCO2 level. Getting my point? By decrease in the PCO2 level concentration, causing, that is, increased ventilation, that is, causes hyperventilation, right? And exactly opposite happens in the metabolic alkalosis. The PCO2 going to change 0.6 mm of mercury per change in 1 millimole per liter of bicarbonate levels. But what happens in respiratory acidosis? There is an increase in the bicarbonate level per 10 mm increase in the PCO2, and acute and chronic depending upon the concentration of bicarbonate, that is 1 in case of acute, whereas it is going to be 3.5 in case of chronic. In respiratory alkalosis, there is going to be fall of 2 millimole per liter of bicarbonate per 10 millimeter of mercury decrease in the PCO2 levels. And in case of respiratory alkalosis, there is going to be decrease in bicarbonate level, which is about 4.5 millimole per liter per 10 millimeters of mercury of fall in the PCO2. So please try to remember this compensatory mechanisms. Now, how are you going to diagnose? What are the steps that are involved in the diagnosis? First, you are going to look at this case, the patient's arterial blood gas analysis report. We have pH is about 7.22 and PCO is going to be around 34, and bicarbonate 12 and sodium 142, potassium 4 and chloride 104, and he has got a history of salicylate ingestion. When such kind of things come, how are you going to diagnose whether the patient has got a metabolic acidosis, alkalosis, or respiratory acidosis or alkalosis? Look at the pH first. The pH is going to decide whether the patient has got acidic pH or the alkaline. Definitely it is acidic here. It is because 7.2. Look for the primary cause of that pH which can coincide with the change in the pH. Look at the pH. pH is decreasing. What has happened to PCO2? It is also in the same direction. Look for that primary component. It's going to be decrease. And what has happened to the bicarbonate? It is also decreased. So they are all in the same direction. All of them are decreased. Look for the secondary the primary compensation and the secondary compensation depends upon the bicarbonate and the PCO2 levels. Getting my point? I told you the compensation happens by respiratory component basically for the metabolic disorder, which involves metabolic acidosis or alkalosis. What has happened to PCO2 is going to decide you the compensation mechanism. Now, if the metabolic acidosis is there, you are going to calculate the anion gap. How are you going to calculate the anion gap? Already we have studied, right? Sodium plus potassium minus chloride, and the unmeasured ions are going to tell you the anion gap. Correlate with the history and the clinical findings also. Now, let us look into metabolic acidosis. There is a decrease in the primary bicarbonate production or increased acid production or ingestion. As anion gap status, depending upon the anion gap, it is classified into high anion gap metabolic acidosis, normal anion gap metabolic acidosis, or decreased anion gap metabolic acidosis. That is HAGMA, NAGMA. Okay, HAGMA means high anion gap metabolic acidosis. NAGMA means normal anion gap metabolic acidosis, and decreased anion gap metabolic acidosis. Now, high anion gap metabolic acidosis. What happens here? Anion gap is going to be greater than 15 to 20 millimole per liter. It may be due to increase in the measured cation itself. It could be because of the patient may be suffering from hyperkalemia. That could be one of the reason. Or there may be a decrease in the unmeasured ions. It could be calcium, magnesium, or hyper gamma globulinemia. It happens in multiple myeloma. Or it could be due to increased negatively charged protein, or it could be due to unmeasured anions, right? Like phosphates, sulfates, and phosphates, sulfates, proteins, organic acids, right? So these are the important causes for high anion gap metabolic acid. Could be hyperkalemia per se, the patient has got increased potassium levels, or it could be decrease in the unmeasured cations like calcium, magnesium. Maybe the patient has got hypocalcemia, hypomagnesemia, right? So these are the causes, and due to increase the unmeasured ions, maybe the patient has got increase in the phosphate sulfate concentration, or maybe due to increased protein concentration. So all these could be the reasons. Now coming to the clinical causes of HAGMA, patient may have renal failure where there is a retention of most of the potassium, phosphorus. It can retain any sort because there is a renal failure. And diabetic ketoacidosis, definitely it could be the reason for high anion gap metabolic acidosis. Could be lactic acidosis per se due to tissue hypoxia type 1 and shock. In type 2, it may be due to impaired metabolism of lactate by the liver. The glucose alanine cycle or the glucose lactate cycle, which was supposed to take place, Cori cycle, is not operating because of the damage to the liver. The lactate gets accumulated and leading to the, see, all are interrelated. See, the lactate utilization is not happening. Why? The Cori cycle is that nothing but indirectly it is a Cori cycle which is not happening because of the liver failure. The poisoning due to salicylates, methanol, ethylene glycol, amino acidureas because of the excessive excretion of protein in the urine, organic acidureas because of excessive production of organic acids, and nitrates and aspirin poisoning. All this will lead to HAGMA. Coming to the NAGMA, both cation anions are lost, so anion gap is normal, but the acidosis can happen still. And the causes could be, remember these are very important causes: diarrhea, intestinal fistula, post hypocapnia, and ureterosigmoidostomy. So there's a loss of bicarbonate and reabsorption of chloride in this condition. And come to the renal tubular acidosis, it's a separate entity. Type 1 is going to be called as distal or classical. It is due to defective secretion of hydrogen in the DCT or collecting tubule. Patient can have hypokalemic hyperchloremic acidosis. Type 2 is proximal RTA. It's due to defect in the PCT's ability to absorb and filter bicarbonate. So the patient will have hypokalemic hyperchloremic acidosis. Look at the type 1, type 2 both. The potassium is going to be decreased, chloride is going to be raised. And type 4 is the most common that is renal tubular acidosis, RTA, due to aldosterone deficiency or antagonism. Hyperkalemic hypochloremic. So the difference here is that type 1 and type 2 will present with the hypokalemic hyperchloremic, very commonly asked NEET PG question. Very confusing. Most of the time we choose a wrong answer for this RTA. They are going to ask you at least 2 to 3 questions with respect to RTA. This topic is going to be repeated in your medicine classes also in future. This topic is very, one has to be very careful about differentiating different types of RTA. What has happened to the serum? Most of the time, hyperkalemia will be the, the answer of the choice in the multiple choices. So the type 4 is going to be more common. They're going to ask you which type is more common. And it's due to aldosterone deficiency or antagonism leading to hyperkalemic hypochloremic acidosis. Okay, remember this. And decreased anion gap, MA, you're going to get it in case of hypoalbuminemia, paraproteinemia, and hypercalcemia. Compensation is by hyperventilation, and the renal compensation happens by promoting the increased excretion of acid and base conservation. Treat the primary cause. If the bicarbonate is deficient and administer bicarbonate, again it's a controversial. because bicarbonate administration causes hypokalemia, hypernatremia, hyperosmolarity, all that, but still we don't have any option. You have to correct it. How are you going to correct this? So bicarbonate is very important. You have to manage when you get a case in the emergency department. These are the things which you need to manage. How are you going to calculate a bicarbonate requirement? It is by 0.5 multiplied by body weight into 24 minus measured bicarbonate levels that you have with the arterial blood gas. It will tell you what is the bicarbonate of the concentration of this particular patient. Suppose if it is 7, you have to minus 24 minus 7, that's it. Half of this, how are we going to administer this bicarbonate? Half of the calculated dose is given in first 3 to 4 hours slowly with potassium monitoring. Again, this is very important. So you're going to give half of the calculated dose in 1 to it is going to in the first 3 to 4 hours. Okay, then keep monitoring potassium levels. Okay, so this very hourly monitoring of potassium in fact is required in these patients. Okay, so take care of this potassium levels along with the calculation of the bicarbonate deficit. Then you go to treatment for RTA cases. Type 1, you're going to do it with 1 to 3 milliequivalent per kg per body alkali with potassium supply, and proximal type 2, you're going to treat it with 10 to 15 milliequivalent. Anyway, for your undergraduate level you don't require it, just for the knowledge purpose I am telling you. Type 4, you can do it with the potassium restricted diet and 1 to 3 milliequivalent per kg per day alkali, because a patient has got a renal failure, so the potassium monitoring is again very important in these patients, because hyperkalemia can lead to cardiac arrhythmias and the patient can die. So it's a very critical situation. How do we remember this causes? Mud pillars for metabolic acidosis, anion gap, and metabolic acidosis, normal anion gap, hard rubs, and metabolic alkalosis, clever, you can remember. In case of high anion gap metabolic acidosis, so methanol poisoning, uremia, diabetic ketoacidosis, isoniazid, anti-tubercular drug used in the treatment of tuberculosis, lactic acidosis, ethanol, renal failure, salicylate poisoning. And normal anion gap metabolic acidosis is seen in hyperalimentation, acetazolamide, renal tubular acidosis. Commonly asked again NEET PG question: diarrhea, uretropelvic shunt, and post hypocapnia and spironolactone. Okay, so these are the things which are going to account for the normal anion gap metabolic acidosis. And in case of metabolic alkalosis, clever word you can remember: contraction, licorice, endocrines like Conn syndrome, Cushing syndrome, Bartter syndrome, vomiting, excessive alkali, refeeding, post hypercapnia, and the patient put on the diuretics. Now coming to metabolic alkalosis, it occurs due to excessive base ingestion, reduced base excretion. The causes are chloride responsive alkalosis due to prolonged vomiting, nasogastric suctioning, upper GI obstruction. Urine chloride is going to be less than 10 mm per liter, and chloride resistant alkalosis due to mineralocorticoid, glucocorticoid, and excessive amount of this. Primary and secondary hyperaldosteronism, Cushing syndrome, adrenal tumor, and in this case the urine chloride is going to be greater than 20 mole per liter. And the patient put on the loop diuretics, exogenous bases like antacids and massive blood transfusion, milk alkali syndrome, IV bicarbonate therapy, generation of bicarbonate from lactate, keto acids, and citrate. Okay. Compensation is by hypoventilation. Metabolic acidosis, hyperventilation. Metabolic alkalosis, hypoventilation. Remember this. By hypoventilation, but increase in PCO2 is not possible above 55 due to hypoxic stimulation of respiratory center. Renal compensation by conserving the excretion of hydrogen and increased bicarbonate excretion. So you're going to give saline resistant alkalosis, you're going to give surgical removal of the tumor and blockage of aldosterone effect, okay, by AC inhibitor or spironolactone. So next about respiratory acidosis, it is due to hypoventilation. The causes of respiratory acidosis, the acute respiratory acidosis, the causes would be bronchopneumonia, bronchitis, asthma, pneumothorax, narcotics, sedatives, and CNS trauma. The chronic like COPD patients and paralysis of respiratory muscles, ascites, peritonitis, sleep apnea. In chronic acidosis, pH may be normal or little changed. Okay, peritoneum is nothing but inflammation of the peritoneum. and ascites is nothing but collection of the fluid in the abdominal cavity. Okay, and sleep apnea, especially the patient with morbid obesity patients, right? Compensation is by excess of carbonic acid is buffered by hemoglobin and protein buffer system. Kidney is also going to conserve the bicarbonate and increases the potassium excretion. Treat the underlying and improve the ventilation, and in case of opioid overdose, you can give the antidote called naloxone, which is about 0.4 to 2 milligram intravenous. Respiratory alkalosis due to hyperventilation, washing out of carbon dioxide, and the causes are going to be high altitude hysteria, fever, septicemia, raised ICT, meningitis. Early stages of salicylate poisoning causes respiratory alkalosis due to stimulation of respiratory center, but later on it's going to shift it towards the metabolic acidosis due to accumulation of keto acids as well as lactate. Compensation by reducing the reabsorption of bicarbonate in the kidney. Treat the underlying cause, acute hyperventilation syndrome from anxiety, rebreathing into the paper bag, sedation for hysteria and anxiety. Most of the patients you come across like this, hysteria and anxiety patients. Now, once you have got an ABG report, how are you going to decide the particular disorder? These are the steps which you need to actually follow the bedside. What is the pH, whether it's going to acidemia or alkalemia? It's a primary disorder. Is it appropriate compensation? Is there any anion gap? Look at the case now. A 65-year-old male presenting with CKA is a diagnosed case of chronic kidney disease with nausea, diarrhea and acute respiratory distress. When the ABG analysis was performed, you can look at the pH grown with 7.23, PCO2 17, PaO2 235. Again, it's for confusing, it's nothing to do with PaO2 now. Sodium is 123, chloride 97, bicarbonate 7, BUN 119 and creatinine 5.1. So, can anyone tell me which acid base disorder this patient has? Can anyone tell me? You can answer, can text me in the WhatsApp. Definitely it is acidosis. It is a metabolic acidosis or respiratory acidosis. Can anyone tell me please? Bicarbonates given 7. You can see here bicarbonate is 7. And blood urea nitrogen is 119. Creatinine is 5.1. Sodium is 123. And PCO2 is 17. I told you to decide any metabolic, any disorder related to acid-base balance, you have to look for 3 things. One is pH, bicarbonate and PCO2. So what has happened to the pH? It is reduced. What has happened to bicarbonate? It is 7. It's going to be decreased. It is less. If it is less and pH is less, what is your diagnosis? Why you are not able to answer? By now you should have answered me the question. No answer? What kind of acidosis it is? Metabolic or respiratory? No one is replying me. So it is metabolic acidosis. I think no one is interested in listening classes. You are not answering me. Very bad. Only Nikita has answered me. So pH is 7.23, PCO2 is 17, PaO2 235 and 50% of FiCO2 on ventilator, and these are the readings. Okay. Now the answer, pH is 7.23. It means patient has got acidosis. This is the first step. Now what is second step? What is the primary disorder? Look at the pH is low and bicarbonate is low. Okay, so patient has got decrease in the bicarbonate, right, and pH is low. That means patient has got decreased bicarbonate levels. Now step 2, pH is low, PCO2 is low. pH and PCO2 are going in the same direction. You see that the PCO2 is also decreased, right? Because PCO2 was, what was the value? 17. So it is decreased. Now PCO2 are going in the same direction. So primary metabolic disorder. Is there a mixed disorder? No. Metabolic acidosis. Now we have come to the conclusion that the patient has got metabolic acidosis. Now we do not know whether it is compensated or not. So how do we do? Winter's formula. Using this, PCO2 is equal to 1.5 multiplied by bicarbonate plus 8. You can remember plus or minus to memorize. That means for every fall of 1 millimole per liter bicarbonate fall, the PCO2 is going to fall by 1.2. Getting my point? Suppose there is a 1 decrease in bicarbonate, 1 millimole per liter decrease in bicarbonate. PCO2 will also decrease by 1.2 millimeters of mercury. That's all. If the serum PCO2 is greater than the expected PCO2, this serum PCO2 is nothing but arterial blood gas analysis we have performed, and we have got the reading of PCO2 so much, 17, 18, whatsoever it may be. Expected means by calculating the Winter's formula, how much it was supposed to be and how much has fallen. These two we are going to compare to decide patient has is compensating or not. How are we going to decide? By calculating and by measuring the PCO2 levels. So now for metabolic alkalosis, how are we going to calculate? For every 10 increase in the bicarbonate, the PCO2 increases by 6. They are in the same direction. Increase the bicarbonate, increase in the PCO2. Suppose if there is a 10 millimole per liter increase in the HCO3 concentration, that is bicarbonate concentration, the PCO2 is also going to increase by 6. Remember this. Now, respiratory acidosis for acute and chronic, for every 10 increase in PCO2, there will be increase in 1 and there is decrease of 0.08 in pH. In case of chronic, every 10 increase in PCO2, the bicarbonate increases by 4. Don't worry about pH, don't remember about the pH, just remember 10:1, 10:1, 10:1, 10:4. And for respiratory alkalosis, for acute, it is 10 decrease in PCO2, the bicarbonate decreases by 2, 10:2. Chronic, for every 10 decrease in the PCO2, the bicarbonate decreases by 5. Getting my point? Just it is opposite. 10:1, 10:4, 10:2, 10:5. Don't worry about the pH much. Okay, so these are the compensations what one should know. Pertaining to the same case, the step 3, let us look for the compensation. With the Winter's formula, when we calculated with the Winter's formula, we got it as 18.5. Okay, the PCO2 was 18.5. When we did the ABG analysis, we got PCO2 expected value was 17, but no, the expected is 18.5, but the measured was 17. Getting my point? The measured PCO2 is 17 with the arterial blood gas analysis. We were expecting that the PCO2 changes would be 18.5. They are close to each other, right? So it is a correct compensation. What we expected, the measured values are also almost same. So this is the correct compensation that has happened. So it is a case of primary metabolic acidosis. Getting my point? Step 4, calculate the anion gap, that is sodium minus chloride minus bicarbonate. Normal that is about 12 plus or minus 2. There's something called delta gap for undergraduate level. I don't think so. You should be knowing about it. But just for the information sake, if there is an anion gap, then calculate the delta gap as well. If there is no anion gap, then start analyzing for the non-anion acidosis. So this is how you are going to calculate the anion gap. That is, the sodium was 123 minus the chloride was 97 and the bicarbonate was 7. So the calculation falls about 19. That means the anion gap has got raised, which is increased. There is no need to correct for the albumin because the serum albumin concentration was 4. Since anion gap is increased, root for the delta ratio. That means when we calculated the anion gap, sodium minus chloride minus bicarbonate, we got the value as 19. Definitely the anion gap has increased. It is a cause for high anion gap metabolic acidosis. That is a complete diagnosis in this patient. Don't worry about the delta ratio, we are not going to talk about it. And suppose the patient, when we calculate the anion gap, if you got a normal, okay, then what will be the reason? See, for the outpatient reason, for anion gap portion is due to increase in the blood urea. Because of uremia, there is a, we have discussed there about what are the causes of HAGMA and what are the causes of NAGMA. Suppose the metabolic, the anion gap was normal, what will you come to the conclusion? Why this patient has got normal anion? Okay, in this patient this patient has got increased anion gap, it is because of uremia. Suppose when we calculate, if you would have got normal anion gap, what is your conclusion? Why normal anion gap? It is due to, the answer is written here, it is due to diarrhea. The patient is also having diarrhea, in the history we have read. So that is the explanation. So that's about the pH and buffers, all that is a summary. That's how you are going to tackle the disturbances of acid base balance. So if you have any doubt, you can text me, and thank you for patient listening.